Democracy and human rights in Iran. What are the chances for the opposition? We'll be talking to the Iranian Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Shirin Ebadi.
Shirin Ebadi, a few years ago in 2003, you won the Nobel Prize for Peace. Now you are here in Bonn to receive the Bonn International Democracy Award. Congratulations for that. But despite these and other awards, I read a newspaper article about you recently that began with the sentence, Shirin Ebadi is clearly a woman on the run. Are you a woman on the run?
That's bound to have come from a state-run Iranian newspaper. As I'm a person who stands up for human rights and democracy in Iran, I'm fighting for human rights not just in Iran, but in the entire world.
In fact, the sentence was not in a newspaper from Iran, but maybe that's not the point. I still want to ask you, do you live in fear? After all, your family has been harassed, your family has been intimidated, your bank account has been frozen, your Center for Defenders of Human Rights in Iran has been closed. Many other things have happened to you. Your Nobel Prize medal has been taken away from you, has been confiscated. Do you live in fear?
The protests mounted by the Nobel Committee and the EU forced the Iranian government to give me back the prize. But now they're trying a new line of harassment. They're now saying I should have paid taxes on the Nobel Peace Prize money. They're saying I owe taxes and have to pay them back. They've frozen my bank accounts and confiscated my financial assets. But none of these things will ever cause me to give up my activities and work. I knew from the start that under an undemocratic state system, you have to be prepared to pay for your involvement in activities like defending human rights. That's the price you have to pay, and I'm paying it.
We're talking about your personal situation here. How much do you know about the situation on the ground in Iran at this point in time?
I receive daily updates via telephone, email, and Persian websites about the situation in Iran. I talk to my colleagues and other people. Unfortunately, I have to say that the situation in Iran is deteriorating by the day.
There have been politically motivated executions in Iran. Recently, more politically motivated executions are planned. From things you have been saying here in Bonn, I have the feeling you are angry that you're not getting enough support from the EU and from EU governments in your battle against such measures.
The death sentence is banned all over Europe. The EU's reaction to executions with declarations and appeals for protest is insufficient. The European Union must adopt serious measures. EU countries should threaten to withdraw their ambassadors from Iran if the country continues to execute political prisoners. I don't mean they should cut off political relations entirely. That's not what I mean. I just think they should threaten to withdraw their ambassadors and to formally limit political relations. That would constitute a serious warning and a form of protest to be reckoned with.
It would be a serious protest, but give me a quick answer. Would the regime in Tehran be listening?
Absolutely. I believe that would elicit an appropriate reaction from the Iranian government. They haven't forgotten the last time that was done. When Iran was involved in state-sponsored terrorism in Europe, EU countries withdrew their ambassadors. That ultimately brought the politically motivated murders in Europe to an end.
Another quick question, maybe a yes or no question. Should Iran have an independent nuclear program? Yes or no?
No.
Should Iran have nuclear weapons?
No.
Should there be sanctions, tougher sanctions, against Iran?
I'm against economic sanctions.
Why?
Economic sanctions hurt ordinary citizens. There are other means that can also be effective. Iranian government ministers and their families, and military commanders and their families, should be denied visas to enter other countries.
When you talk about the Iranian people, this crisis at the moment, it all began last year, last June, with the presidential elections. The outcome was disputed. There was protests on the streets. Many people were killed. What have you personally learnt in the last year as these events have unfolded?
Those incidents have taught me that the Iranian people should continue to make peaceful demands. We shouldn't resort to violence. That would just serve to justify the government's own violent actions.
When we talk about the protests and the opposition movement, the Green Movement, some people, and some people inside this movement, say it is leaderless. They say the movement needs a leader. And some people have compared you to Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma and have said you would be the ideal leader for the opposition movement. Is that a role you can envisage?
Ms. Suu Kyi was the leader of a party that stood for election and won. I, on the other hand, don't belong to any party or political organization. So I don't see myself as a leader of the Green Movement. I'd like to stress, though, that I believe in the Green Movement and am one of the many people who support it.
So no special role for you in the Green Movement, but there is a very special role for women in the Green Movement.
That's absolutely right. Women make up the front ranks of the movement. And as we saw, it was a woman who became the movement's icon, Neda. Women make up a special part of the Green Movement.
And the young people in Iran, over half of the population, what is the figure now? Maybe 60–70% of the population, 75% are under 30. They have a special role.
That's also correct. Young people and women are two sources of great potential in this movement. For that reason, I'm very confident about the future of Iran.
Where do you imagine Iran will be, let's say, in a year's time? Where will Iran be in 10 years' time?
I'm convinced that the Iranian people will install a democratic government in the country one day. The timing will depend on various factors and aspects, including things that happen outside the country. The situation of Iran's neighboring countries, for example, or the question of its nuclear program. It will also depend on Iran's future relationships with the US and China. All these things could play a role, but as I said, I'm convinced that a democratic system will be established in Iran.
That is a good place to finish our conversation. Thank you very much for talking to us today, Shirin Ebadi.